I think something that could be interesting that we speak about today is, our tendency as a culture, society to, sort of measure success through the lens of, wins and losses, more of like a binary metric, it could be athletes in business. It feels like success for most people is like a zero sum game. I'm interested, both of us, for us to speak about it and say, okay, should that be a useful frame or should we shift it?
You, on the one hand, you need to have metrics. You need to have something that you measure your success by, where you can objectively say, I completed the mission or I didn't. I got this
Hmm.
done or I didn't. On the other hand, if you get too fixated on those metrics, you can lose the value of the growth that happened as you were striving for those metrics. And I think sometimes,
Yeah. Okay, so you said that, like the growth, right? The reason that I wanted to talk about that, the reason why it popped in my mind, like the wins and losses, is it feels like that's the end,
mm,
But in life, if you're lucky or blessed enough to live it, is it's longer than the short time frame that you're playing the game or whatever metric you're using to decide whether you're successful or not. It's like it's longer than that. So like on a long enough horizon,
yeah,
what do the wins and like the small wins and losses, they're important for sure to, like you say, be tapped in and continuously improve, but on a long enough horizon, because I say it because I know I do that for myself, like,
mm,
the small wins, but then when you zoom out on a on a longer horizon, it's like this may not even matter or be a win for me, however long down the road.
yeah. I mean, but I think, what's the measuring stick? What are you calling the win or the loss? Because, you know, there's certain metrics that you will no longer have an opportunity to get. For example, let's say you're an athlete, you measure your success by championships. You retire, you
That
no
window's
longer have
closed.
access to get that result, right? And you can apply that to obviously a bunch of different fields. So what came to my mind when you said that is, how are you implementing metrics that also allow you to measure your success independent of something that has such a finite life? You know what I mean? Like, how do you measure your wins and losses on a daily basis and tie that to something that is driven by you internally, not something that's driven by proof that you can get externally? Because at the end of the day, a lot of us have goals, but what's the purpose behind setting goals? Is it to specifically achieve them? I would argue, I would argue the purpose of the goal is to be able to get you to take the actions necessary to get to where you are trying to get to. And that's why I think, if it's framed that way and thought about that way, then it's a lot easier not to think about it as an ending. For example, you may have heard a lot of Olympians who end up reaching the pinnacle of their sport. After they reach that point, a lot of them get like severely depressed.
The chase is gone.
Yeah, exactly. The chase is gone. I feel, if you have that frame where you're just so fixated on the specific goal, for example, I'm sure there's probably Olympic athletes that think in both of these ways. There's probably some that think the goal is to get gold, period. That's the goal. I have a finite career. This is the small window that I have. The goal is to get gold. But I'm
Mhm.
also sure there's probably a lot of Olympians that have the mentality and the mindset where they say, the goal is to squeeze every ounce of potential out of this body that I can that I have. I'm going to try to maximize my God-given ability, work as hard as I can, and let the chips fall where they may. That's
Mhm.
something that can be carried to other areas. That can be carried to business. That can be carried to fatherhood, motherhood. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of different areas. But if it's so fixated, like gold, 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 then what are you going to do when you no longer have an opportunity to get the gold?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I think. Like I said, that's a very, very interesting, valid point because where it's taking me is when you have wins, you have losses, you have success or failure, right? There doesn't exist a lot of space for like the in between, and I
Mm,
think sometimes speaking about the in between, at least for me, feels like I'm settling. Like if because what exists between the two, like what exists in the space where an athlete or well, I'm using that as like a template frame, but it applies
right.
to but an athlete says I'm going to maximize my potential, right? I don't control what happens here. I don't control the contracts I get. I don't control if it's a team sport. I don't control the whole team. Like somebody may miss a shot, whatever the case is, right? I'm gonna maximize my potential, but at the end of the day, if they don't win, right? If they see it through that lens, like the rest of us see it, and that's how most of the conversations get framed, they could come out of it feeling like because there wasn't a win, it equals a loss, because there wasn't the quote unquote like typical success, it equals a failure. But what you're saying is there's a lot of value in that middle space, right? But it's just like, how do we access that conversation for the middle space? Could you even genuinely have that conversation? Like, imagine if Skip and like Shannon or Stephen A were like spoke about athletes with respect for their career, because they don't do that really. It's like you either won or you lost. You know?
Yeah, I genuinely think it comes back to the value that you personally place on the metric, because I don't think there's wrong or right. Staying on the sports theme, someone like Michael Jordan, for example, it's known now publicly that he was, extremely hyper competitive. I would assume that someone like him, on a personal level, if he didn't get any championships, I'm sure he probably would not think of his career successful. I don't know, but
Mm.
I find it hard to believe that he would consider his career a win if he got no championships. And if that's true to his, and that seems like it would be true to like his identity, and very, very authentic to him as a person. Like it seems from the stories that, a lot of us have heard, like he seems to be very, very driven by being able to say, I won, you lost.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And I think when you talk about that middle space, there's tons of people who achieve great things but don't get objective recognition. And I think that's why I think the wins and the losses can be so important to certain people. Like you could say you're a great artist, but that doesn't hold as much weight necessarily as someone who has a Grammy to show, like, look, this is my objective proof that I'm X, Y, or Z. But I don't know. It's
That's
tough.
that's what that's what I'm saying. Like, yes, the wins and losses are important, but like, but there's so many people, like you were saying, who have achieved greatness,
Mm.
but by, in my opinion, what could be like a stroke of luck or maybe just like bad timing, like they don't have the exact facilities they need to facilitate the reaching the pinnacle, or like wrong place, wrong time. They are great. And maybe the luck is required to achieve greatness as well, like in that space, or to be recognized. There's another point of like, okay, what does it matter what people think about your career if you
Yeah, yeah,
because it's an outside value, right? It's not like the person that lived it probably feels differently about the people that are speaking about them, right? Are speaking
yeah.
about it.
I feel like we all need to define what greatness is, what success is, or what a win is for us. And obviously, I know in sports is probably the easiest example that you can think of, where it
Yeah,
is
because
actually
it's
by,
yeah, the
yeah,
frame's given to you.
you
Yeah,
either win or or you lose. Or exams, like we when we
you
were in
pass or
university,
fail. Yeah,
sometimes you have pass fail exams. So there definitely are certain areas where that is the metric, and it's just not rational or logical to use something else. If you're writing a test and the pass fail mark is a 70 and you get a 60, like technically you did objectively fail. However, if you know that, let's say in this field, like this is a field that you struggle with immensely, I don't know, say you're dyslexic and you failed every other math exam that you've taken in the past, and on this one you got a 65 and you were proud of that, you can count that as a personal win if your definition of a win is, what, I'm going to get better than I did last time. But that doesn't change the reality
mm,
of when it comes to the results of this test, you failed. You know what I mean? And I feel like
mm,
even something as simple as your career, there's a lot of people, I'm sure there's a lot of athletes who probably do measure their success or failure by maximizing their potential. And I'm sure some of those people that got, injured, which happens all the time, their
mm.
careers were cut short. They didn't get into the ideal situation. It wouldn't be far-fetched for a lot of these people to struggle and maybe view their career as a failure. Not because, even if they got a championship, even if someone got injured and the year that they got injured, their team wins a chip. Like a lot of those people probably would still feel internally like, yeah, my career was a failure. Why? Because the way that I measure success, the way that I measure a win was being able to maximize my potential. That opportunity got robbed from me. Therefore, I feel like this was actually not a win. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this question. This question as a thread then. because the exam is a perfect example. If we take a career, collapse it into like an exam, and there's clearly a metric of where the outcome is binary, right? It's pass, fail, win, loss, right? The small space in between is maybe I got a 50 on this last time, now I got a 60. It's not a I didn't win, like I said, but I improved. Now I'm thinking the win-loss framework is because so much of like our upbringing in the world is focused on like those binary things, like school. If you go through public schools, a lot of pass fail. If you play sports as a kid, which like most people do, is win losses. I think we take that and start applying that frame into like every other aspect, right? So do you struggle with getting a more nuanced perspective in other areas that don't require that? Because what you brought in the frame of like exam perfect, because what you're saying is that there's some areas where the binary is required, like that framework is required. But what I'm hearing you say as well is there's also spaces that exist that aren't like that. It doesn't sound like you struggle with navigating those areas, but I'm curious. Do you? Because I feel like I do.
Yeah, no, honestly, I don't. I don't really. And I think it's because I can make the distinction between how much value I feel should be placed on the outcome. So, for example, let's talk getting your driver's license. Let's use that for an example. You either you go do your test, you either get your driver's license and you pass or you fail. For me, the framework that I use to comfortably operate with how I want to assess the outcome is the default outcome that's presented to me. How well does that align with my mission and my values? For example, if my value as a man is I need to win, and I identify win as when there's an opportunity to get first place or to be in the top spot, if I am not in that spot, then I have failed. Let's say that's how I defined a win.
Mm,
Then for me, I'm not gonna look at all the situations that we just discussed. None of that would matter because for me personally, if that was the case, like that wouldn't be okay with me because I value winning and it's tied to this definition. Whereas, like I said, we're talking about getting a driver's license. Like there's the reason why it's easy for me to look at that as binary is that there's no outcome that is infringing on any of my values or conflicts with my mission or aligns with it. It's just it's outside of that thing. So I can take the
mm,
result and have it on the outside. And I'm just thinking like, okay, in pursuit of this specific result, because there's a lot of things like that where it's just the result is really, really what matters. And in those situations, the way that I personally try to look at them is okay, if this truly is a binary situation, what frame do I want to use as I chase that result? Can I be aligned with my mission? Can I be aligned with my values? Can I walk in alignment with the person that I'm trying to be as I'm chasing this thing? So for example, back to the getting a driver's license. It's like, okay, am I preparing as best as I can? Am I
mm,
asking my dad to teach me how to reverse park, how to 3-point turn, how to do all this stuff? Am I scheduling the driving test in a place that I think is going to give me the best result? Like, have I done like, and that's one of my values for me is like being proactive. Am I taking all the steps that I feel like I need to take to put the odds in my favor? If I did all those things and I failed, it would suck. I'd probably be pissed, but like at the end of the day, I did what I could do. If I didn't do any of those things and I failed, that would be a loss for me. I could be like, bro, what are you
yeah.
doing? Like,
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say, and I'm taking notes on this. What I'm hearing you say is if the outcome doesn't conflict with your identity, being that yes, you may have, if we're looking at it in a binary, which like a win or loss column, if there was a loss in the column, but you did everything in your capability, in your power to put yourself in a position to win, the loss doesn't infringe on your identity of being somebody who prepares to win. Okay, that's fire, yo, that's fire. I think because I'm listening to that, I'm like, man, that makes a lot of sense why. Because I sense that you didn't feel that way, but it makes a lot of sense why you don't. Because I'm
so
thinking I'm thinking for some people, and I'm including myself in that. There's like any loss is a signal that you're not a winner, right? And
mm,
in your case, what you're saying is that's not the case for you. Like if yeah, you can lose, but if I did everything I could to win and ended up losing, then that's not on that's not on me. Like you're aware that sometimes the chips don't fall in your favor, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to know more about your perspective too, because you know how I am. Like I'm also, can be a very competitive person. Um, like when I'm hooping, for example, like I'm not someone who likes to lose. And in those situations, same thing applies. Because in those situations, and maybe in some instances, I have irrational confidence, and I think that's a good thing at times. But if I'm hooping against someone who I know is just head and shoulders better than me, and I played my best game and I lost, I'm not gonna like losing, but I'm not gonna. I could walk away, look myself in the mirror, and be like, bro, like dude was better than me today. Like,
Yeah.
what can I do? But if I lose to someone who's a scrub, bro, like I can't handle that. Like that, those are the things that really bother me. So I think that's a big thing. That's a big thing too. What is it like for you though? Like, what's your mentality when it comes to just this whole thing?
Yeah, I think the framing of identity is something that I think about a lot because that to me is probably where the issues
Mm.
come from. Like what you're saying makes perfect sense. Like if I don't expect to go in a one-on-one versus Kyrie and even put up a point, right? Or
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
or get a stop,
You can
but
get a
I'm
point.
saying,
He's pinched.
huh?
You can get a 1-2 point. He's
Yeah,
small.
maybe, but but I mean, like, I think there's a time I don't know if I still feel that way, but there's probably a time where in my mind I would actually be cheesed that I still lost.
Mm.
Like it would actually bother me when it really shouldn't. And that I'm taking that like you can take that into different frames. Like if you're the only thing to do going forward from there is either accept that he's better or dedicate yourself to improving, right? Like it's the only two things that you can do outside of like feeling upset. But I think the moments that happen in life that challenge whatever frame you have of yourself, whatever perspective you have of yourself, your identity are the tougher
But I'm
the
asking you
tougher.
specifically though. So tell me, like, from your actual perspective, you're saying that when you're in situations that you've seen that there's a win and a loss, you're saying like when you experience the quote unquote like the loss, that feels like an attack on your identity.
Yeah, if I'm in a situation where there's a win and a loss and I get the loss, I feel like I'm not saying I feel like a loser. Like, it's like
That's
but
the
like
most accurate time.
yeah. Feel like a loser in that space. I'm like, there's no way. Like, I have to do something to get it back. It's like I know, for example, we met each other in uni, right? So like, both of us, like, how many times have we like, yo, for example, right? You're better than me in basketball. You actually played. But how many times did I lose to you? And I kept saying, yo, let's go, let's run it back, let's run it back. Like, it bothered me, but it doesn't too much anymore. But I think for like things like that, like sports, I understand it better. But I think I find myself taking that frame into different areas.
You know what I think of when you say that is because I think we can all, or a lot of us can be like that. I know I've been like that. You've been open with some of the struggles I've had in the past with like my trading, for example. When I hooped, I had roommates. Like I've hooped against people. Like that's a very common thing in sports, where it's like, or the younger bro is just trying to, they're like run it back, run it back, run it back. I think that if or when you're in a space that's how you're operating, it's not the win and the loss itself. I think it's what are you making that mean about yourself? What is it signaling? I think that's why it's not uncommon at all for people to just chase the win. Because I think a valuable thing to think about in that situation is asking yourself, why do I feel like I need evidence that is not associated with being a loser? What
Mm,
does that even mean? Where does that even
yeah,
stem from? Like, why do I feel like, because I think that's really what it is. It's not like you actually care about saying, like, oh, I won, I beat Myles. It's like, no, I need, like in the basketball example, it's like,
yeah,
no, I need evidence and I want evidence right now
yeah.
that shows that aligns with my identity that I'm X. I'm a winner. I don't lose.
Mm.
I'm perfect, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that's facts. That's facts. It's something that you got to challenge. I think in the world can inform you enough, for lack of a better term, like beat it out of you in a sense. Like you're gonna get humbled, and that's those moments are the moments you're gonna have to reflect and be like, what am I allowing this signal to mean? What does that win mean? Right? Does it mean that I'm a loser, or does it mean that maybe I should approach it differently? Um, you know. So now that's it's an interesting perspective to hear you say, because I think maybe when we were younger, I think you probably framed a lot more under that binary column, but it seems to me like
You think so?
I think so.
Interesting.
I
Makes you
think
say that.
so. I definitely remember you getting more, like having a less nuanced perspective, like not the same perspective you have now, where you're handling the you're handling the question is, yeah, yes, there's wins and losses, but as long as I do what I meant to do, I'm fine with it.
Honestly, I think I realized over the last few years, I've always been someone who is like, they set their goals. I would set my income goal. I would set goals in my trading. I'd say, okay, this is where I'm going to get to by the end of this year or within 6 months or whatever the case is. The truth, whether you want to accept it or not, the truth is that if your outcome is based on external factors, you only have a limited amount of control over whether you're going to get there. If I just got my real estate license, for example, and I say I'm going to make $1,000 in my first 6 months of business, do I think it's useful to have that goal? Yes, absolutely. But do you really have full control over whether people are going to buy houses from you? No, you don't. You could be doing everything right, all the right things, locked in with a mentor. You're doing all the showings, you're doing all the sales, like you're doing everything that you need to do to maximize your probability. But if it's, I don't know, COVID times two, and people just aren't buying places where you live, and that's not able to happen, then like what are you going to do? Call yourself a loser after that? And so I think just being able to take a step back and reframe, and now I actually feel like it's very, and don't get me wrong, it's very useful to still have these goals. But like I said earlier, I think the reason it's useful is because goals usually force people to implement the activities that are going to bring the result. And that's why I'm kind of shifting even how I do things now. I'm really focusing on setting goals that are activity based. Like, okay, what are the things I need to do that are going to maximize the likelihood of me getting X, Y, or Z? You know what I mean? And back to the sports thing. I'm sure and you hit on something really, really huge earlier, which was that element of luck. In sports, that stuff happens all the time. You could be doing everything right, but if you don't have the luck, you don't have that right bounce, you don't have your whole team healthy, you don't have whatever the case is, then what? You're just gonna say, I'm a loser? No, maybe you didn't complete the mission, you didn't accomplish the number one goal, and that's fine. That there's things that are objective. But still, you have to take those things into account, like what's within your control and what's not.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing that's important for myself, for you, for anybody that's like in that space. Focus on and understand what is important to you, and in those spaces when there's a clear quote unquote outcome that you're chasing, understand that you I'm what I'm gonna do to chase that is put myself in a position to achieve that and to to reach that goal. It's not to say that that's enough to get there, but that's gonna be enough for me if I don't get it, because I'm not in control of, again, winning the championship is just like the metaphor, right? For whatever the pinnacle is, for whatever you want to reach. Like I'll put myself in, train X amount of hours a day, watch film X amount of hours a day. I'm gonna do everything that the best people in the world, best players, best athletes in the world do to achieve the goal. But at the end of the day, if I don't reach it at the end of the season, I'm not gonna go home and say I'm a failure. No, I put myself in a position. I gotta maybe do the same thing again. I think the question I was asking in the beginning, but the framing is like, 'cause I feel like some people, after, if they do everything they that's in their power, they don't give themselves the credit for doing everything in their power. It's just solely focused on whether or not it's a win or a loss, right? And if they don't get the win, or if I don't get the win, then it's like you discount everything that you did to try to get it. It's just I didn't get it, right? Which is like that's a darker place to be in than as opposed to I try my best, chips in the fall. Let's get back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a perfect world, there's also a space for both of those things to exist. And I think there is a space that both of those things exist. Like you can still get on an objective loss, understand that you didn't meet the goal. You failed in terms of whatever that goal or specific metric or objective was. I think the key thing to take away from what you just said is not making that mean something about you. I think
Yeah.
that's really the key. You could have an opportunity to get a great client. You blow the meeting, you fumbled, it didn't go well. They say they're not going to be working with you. And it was a huge opportunity. You dropped the ball. It happens, man. Like it literally happens. You were just watching football yesterday and someone
Hmm.
literally dropped the ball. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that stuff happens, right? And
Mhm.
and I don't think it's helpful to just be like, oh well, I tried my best. Like, no, they have to. I think they have to live together. You have to say, you know what? Okay, I didn't complete the mission. I didn't meet this objective. That's not ideal. I don't want this result again. What adjustments am I gonna do to put myself in the best position to have a different outcome next time? What am I gonna do to make sure that I don't make the same mistakes or make the same missteps that led me to this time? Again, if you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, I didn't meet the objective, like, and you're making that mean that you're a loser or whatever the case is, like, there's no right or wrong. All I would say is, like, at the end of the day, a lot of us, we want results and we want to be happy. I think that's fair to say a lot of us want that. But I think the question is, like, what's going to be more useful and helpful to you long term? For some people, actually belittling themselves, berating themselves, like speaking poorly to themselves, that actually does help them. Is
Mhm.
it the healthiest thing? No, not
Yeah.
necessarily. But I know I've done it. I've been playing sports where I'm playing below the level that, or we've been playing pong before, and I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Like, you got to lock in, or I'm hooping, or I'm
Yeah.
lifting. Like, there have been times, but the difference is when I'm me personally, when I'm talking to myself in that manner, I don't actually believe like these negative things about me. If I'm lifting and I can't lift and I'm not lifting, I'm like, bro, you're weak. What do you say? I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that that's a tactic to motivate myself. I don't internally believe you're like, you know what I mean? So yeah, the last thing I was just gonna say is, at the end of the day, do what works for you.
Yeah.
Understand the implications of,
Understanding it is important.
yeah, and because if you're okay with that, then you're cool. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. But for a lot of people, there's probably both. For a lot of people, like doing, maybe speaking to themselves negatively, whatever the case is, that's gonna help them get results. And ultimately, if results make them happy, that works for them. There's probably another bucket of people where it's like talking to yourself negatively and making losses mean negative things about your identity. That probably can be a slippery slope for them, where they start losing self-esteem, they lose confidence, they no longer want to take risks, they no longer are happy. So at the end of the day, I think it comes down to what we said earlier, like knowing yourself, knowing your definition of success, your values, your mission, and what you're trying to accomplish, and having that as a foundation to make your decisions.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't even think I can say anything more more on the topic. I think we should leave it. I think we should leave it there. 'Cause I think we covered it. This was like this was like a I was asking and I got the answers that I was looking for because
Fire.
yeah, it's yeah, it's about, taking the time to understand, because you create your own value. You create, what this means to you, how you interpret it.
Say that again, bro. You People don't really internalize that and think about that. You do create your own value when it comes to this specific thing. We're not talking about what you're getting paid, or like, you
Yeah,
do create your own value when it's tied to your satisfaction and your happiness. No one
yeah,
else. That's
yeah,
coming from
yeah.
internally, right? So, all right, man. Well, I think it was a good conversation. We'll wrap it up there. For anyone who made it this long listening to us, thank you. We appreciate you listening. We
Yes, sir.
appreciate any feedback. We're just gonna try and get better and better, and we'll be back with another one soon.